Hello, everybody. We've just had Christmas, haven't we? And that's when we remembered that Jesus was born in a stable. It was cold. It was probably quite dark in there. And he was born in sort of very poor conditions. Now, the king of the country, which was called Judea, was King Herod. Now, he didn't go to see the baby. He was angry when he heard that Jesus was born. And it was said that Jesus had been born to be a king. King Herod didn't want another king in his country, and he had a very cruel plan. All the little children under 2 years old would be killed. In that way, he could be sure that Jesus wouldn't live and wouldn't take over. One night, Joseph had a dream. In the dream, he saw King Herod and heard his plan. Joseph knew that the baby Jesus was in great danger. He heard a kind voice say to him, "Take Mary and the child away from this place. Go to Egypt and stay there until it's safe." Joseph woke up. He put all they needed into a bag and he untied a donkey. Mary woke up too. She lifted the baby Jesus and held him close to her. Then she climbed onto the donkey and Joseph led them out of town. They walked many miles until they reached Egypt. There they lived for a short time, but one day Joseph heard that King Herod had died. His son had become king in his place. Joseph decided to return to his own land, but to keep away from the big towns. They made their way back to the little town of Nazareth. There they unpacked and tried to make their home comfortable. Rugs were laid on the floor. Mary washed the cooking pots and ground some corn to make some bread. Joseph was a carpenter. He began to make wooden tables and yokes for oxen so that he could earn a living. In this poor little home, Jesus grew from a baby to a boy. And when he was about 6 years old, he went to school. Some of you are 6, and you'd go to school if you could at the moment. So he was about the same age. Just imagine that. I wonder if his school was like ours. They certainly didn't have computers. They didn't have electricity. But they would have sat down and learned things. He learned to read, and he was told stories about Moses and David. He helped Joseph to put away the tools at the end of the day, so he helped his dad. And he asked Mary and Joseph many, many questions, like children do. I bet you ask your parents lots of questions, don't you? So Jesus grew up just the same as you and I did. Every year, Mary and Joseph went with all the other village people to the big city of Jerusalem. They joined together in a special meal, and they sang songs and they said prayers to God. When the boys were 12 years old, they could go with their parents. Jesus was really glad when he could go too. It was a long way to Jerusalem, but at last they reached the city and they made camps, so they lived in tents for a little while. In Jerusalem, there was a large building called the Temple, and inside the temple there were many very clever teachers and who could read books to the people all about God. Jesus listened and he talked to them for a long time. They were really surprised at how much he knew. Jesus forgot about Mary and Joseph, and he slept curled up in a corner near the walls of the temple. And early the next morning, he went inside again. The other people were packing up and starting back home. All day long they walked, stopping at night to eat and rest. Mary saw that Jesus wasn't with them. She ran looking for Jesus, but she couldn't find him. She was very worried in case he had been hurt. I wonder if you've ever done that. If you've ever got lost from your parents. And I bet your parents were really worried when they had to try and find you. Joseph and Mary walked all the way back to Jerusalem looking for Jesus. Oh dear. Let's go and look in the temple, said Joseph. That's the last place we saw him. And they found Jesus inside the temple with the teachers, talking and listening. We've been so worried about you, said Mary. Why did you stay behind when we left yesterday? Jesus said, I thought you'd know that I was in God's house and that I have his work to do. Mary and Joseph didn't know what he meant, but they often thought about what he'd said. Can you imagine it? I wonder what kind of games Jesus played when he was at home. I wonder if the same are the games that you play. I wonder if they had quizzes like Steve does. They won't have been on a computer, though. I bet they played with sticks and balls and maybe had skipping ropes. But they were outside a lot of the time. But they grew up just like we do. Jesus was a little boy, a child. He loved stories. I wonder what else he might have learnt. Most of their stories come from the Old Testament, from the Bible. Them today. Now, Steve has got another quiz for you. I don't know what it is. I don't remember hearing it, but I know he's done one. Next week, we're going to have another story by Max Lucado. Think about it this week, when you're having to do your schoolwork, that Jesus had to do the same kind of schoolwork. Bye.
Hello, boys and girls. She's done it again, hasn't she? Another amazing story. What a very unusual and brand new, exciting story that was. I bet you must think it's amazing, living with somebody that tells such amazing stories all of the time. Well, actually, it's not like that. Mandy doesn't tell stories all of the time. She saves them up for special occasions, like when she speaks to you, boys and girls. Anyway, enough of my waffle. Let's get on. I've got a quiz. What's a quiz? That's where I ask you some questions to see how much you know. Now, I don't want you to be worried if you don't know the answers to all of these questions. If your mum or your dad or your brothers or sisters are about, you can ask them. But the important thing is learning. So if you don't know the answer this time, it may well be, if you listen carefully, that the next time I ask the same question, which could be next week, couldn't it? You will know the answer. So here goes. They're all things that you might learn at church. Here's the first question. Ready? What's the name of the man that we find in the Bible who was thrown into a den of lions because he prayed and the king didn't like it? What was his name? I'll give you a clue. It began with a D. Was it David? Or Dennis? Or Donald? Or Douglas? No, it was none of those names. Did you get it? His answer was Daniel. Daniel was thrown into a den of lions because some nasty men had tricked the king into passing a law that nobody should pray to anything but to him and his idol. God saved him and protected him. The lions didn't hurt him. I gave you a bit of a clue in the question that I asked before, but in this second question, Question number 2. What is the name of the book that we use to read stories about God and his followers? What is the name of that book that we open up sometimes in church and read from? What's it called? Any ideas? See if you can find out between you. I think I heard the answer then. Somebody saying it. Yes, it's the Bible. The Bible. And my third question is about that. The Bible is really not so much a book, but a big collection of books, all gathered together like a sort of small library, all joined together. But the question is, how many books does it have in the whole collection, gathered together inside those covers? How many books actually are there? Any ideas at all? I'll have a quick sip of my coffee whilst you're giving it some thought. I guess it's one of those questions you either know or you don't. You can't really guess the right number. The number is 66. That's a number easy to remember, isn't it? Next time, 66 different books in the Bible, all joined together to make one big long book. Okay, question number 4. Number 4. Christmas was only a few weeks ago now. Do you remember the place where Jesus was born? Do you? Do you remember the name of the place where Jesus was born? Begins with a B, with a B, a B. It was called... Can you remember? It's on the tip of your tongue. Bethlehem. That's the one. Bethlehem. Now, question number 5's a slightly difficult one. Can you give me the name of Jesus's cousin? He's mentioned in the Bible, and he used to baptize people in the River Jordan, dip them in the water after they decided to follow God and serve him. What was his name? What do we call him? Jesus's cousin. I can see some of you can remember. His name was John the Baptist. John the Baptist. Can you remember that for next time? Number 6. Going back to Christmas, or just after Christmas again. Can you remember one of the 3 different gifts that the wise men from the East brought to give to the baby Jesus? They brought 3 very special, valuable, expensive gifts with them. Can you name just one of them? I think you'll find that one a bit easier, although not so easy to say. One was gold, another one was frankincense, and another one was myrrh. Well done. I'm just going to have a quick sip of coffee before I ask you question number 7. Here it is. Number 7. Who was Peter's brother? Jesus had 12 disciples, 12 special followers. Peter was one of them, and his brother was another. What was the name of his brother? Begins with an A, with an A. Was it Adam, perhaps? Or Abel? Or Adrian? Or... well, what was it? Can you remember? Oh, you can. It was Andrew, of course. Well done. Andrew is the right answer. Okay. Right at the beginning of the Bible, there's a story how God flooded the earth, and he used Noah, a man called Noah, who was very old at the time, build a great big boat in the middle of the dry land. And the idea was that he was going to gather together all the animals in the world at that time, some of each kind, to join him on the ark, so that when he flooded the world, they wouldn't die, and they would all live, and they could populate the world again. How many of each kind of animal went onto the ark to join him? Can you remember? It wasn't a large number. I think one or two of you got it. It was two, a male and a female, a man animal and a lady animal, went onto the ark of each kind. And then when the flood went down, they went back out onto the dry land, and there were still some animals on the earth that could have babies in the future, and all the animal populations and the people populations would grow again. Well done. Okay, two of the other disciples of Jesus' special 12 men that followed him were named, they were brothers too, and they were named James and John. But what was the job they did? What was the work they did before Jesus called them to be a disciple, a follower of his? What job did they do? Yes. No, they weren't carpenters. They weren't builders. They weren't doctors. Any ideas? They were fishermen. Just one more sip of my coffee before the last question. What kind of creature swallowed Jonah? What kind of creature swallowed Jonah? He was thrown overboard in the storm by the sailors. He landed in the sea. There's a clue then. It's a sea animal or something came along and swallowed him until it spat him out 3 days later on dry land. What was it that swallowed him? Must have been pretty big, mustn't it? No, it wasn't a shark. That'd have probably eaten him. Oh, dear me. And it was the Bible says it was a big fish. It might have been what we call a whale today. Okay, that's the last question today. That's the end of my quiz. But boys and girls, I'll be back next week with another game or quiz after another one of Mandy's supersonic stories. Until then, it's me, Steve, saying bye for now.